The crystal chandeliers of St. Jude's estate cast a fractured, golden light over the sea of guests. But for Tina Shaw, only one person existed. She smoothed the silk of her graduation gown, a deep sapphire that matched the hope shimmering in her eyes. From across the grand ballroom, she watched him, Sam, not her uncle, not her guardian, but the man who had been the sun in her orphan world for a decade. Tonight, on the cusp of her new life, she held a fragile, secret wish that their dynamic might finally shift, that he might finally see her as the woman she had become. Sam, impeccably tailored in a charcoal suit, moved to the center of the room and took a microphone. A hush fell. Tina's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of anticipation. He was going to say something about her achievements. His gaze, however, swept over her head, distant and coolly professional. The garish, pulsing lights of the amusement park bled together in Tina's vision, a dizzying kaleidoscope of manufactured joy. The cheerful screams from the roller coaster and the sticky sweet smell of cotton candy are a sensory assault, amplifying the hollow ache in her chest. Beside her, Sam Judges and his fiancée, Mona, laughed at some shared joke, their shoulders brushing. They looked perfect, a glossy magazine cover come to life. Tina was the misplaced, dog-eared page. "I'm not feeling well," she announced, her voice barely audible above the din. She pressed a hand to her stomach, hoping the performance was convincing. It wasn't entirely a lie. Watching them together made her physically sick. This was the final, brutal lesson in a long education of knowing her place. She was a third wheel, an awkward reminder of Sam's past guardianship, and it was time to remove herself from the equation. Mona turned, her expression a perfect mask of concern. "Oh, you poor thing. Sam, darling, the park is so crowded. Why don't you have Mark drive her home? There's no sense in all of us leaving." The suggestion was a masterstroke of casual cruelty, isolating Tina while framing it as a kindness. Sam hesitated, his gaze flicking to Tina. For a split second, she saw a flicker of conflict in his dark eyes, a shadow of the man who used to check for monsters under her bed. But it vanished as quickly as it came, replaced by the cool pragmatism of the CEO, the dutiful fiancé. "That's a good idea," he agreed, his tone clipped. He pulled out his phone, already dialing his driver. The transaction was swift, efficient, and utterly devastating. He had chosen Mona. He had chosen to stay. The fear she'd been suppressing for years solidified into a cold, hard certainty. She was a burden he was finally ready to set down. Left on the curb as the black sedan disappeared, the park's festive glow felt mocking. The laughter and music faded into a dull roar, leaving her profoundly alone. Taxis flew past, their occupied lights glowing like taunts. The simple act of hailing a cab felt like a monumental struggle, a stark metaphor for the independent life she was now being forced to embrace. Hours later, the silence of her childhood home was a bomb. She had refused to sell it, a last piece of her parents she couldn't bear to part with. And now it was her sanctuary. In the dusty quiet, she methodically arranged her severance from Sam's world. On the scarred wooden table sat a bank card and a plain white envelope. The card held the funds from every expensive gift he'd ever given her: jewelry, designer bags, and new coral sold. It was a small fortune, enough to supplement the money from mortgaging this very house. Inside the envelope, a note, her handwriting neat and deliberate, a stark contrast to the turmoil in her heart. "Sam," it read, "this should cover all the expenses you incurred raising me." The sterile white corridor of the hospital smelled of antiseptic and quiet panic. St. Judges stood frozen, the doctor's words echoing in the clinical silence. "Mr. Judges, the rebar has caused significant internal trauma to both patients. We only have one surgical team immediately available. The one who waits will risk permanent nerve damage, a lifelong disability. You have to make a choice. Time seemed to warp, stretching and compressing around him. Through a fog of shock, he saw a nurse pass by Tina's gurney, her face pale and still. He saw Mona, his supposed fiancée, being prepped by another teen. The weight of his guardianship, his lies, and his hidden heart crashed down on him. A nurse, pausing to check a chart near the operating theatre, overheard his strained, desperate voice give the directive that would shatter everything, save Ms. Mona first. When Tina awoke, it was to a dull, throbbing pain in her leg, and an even deeper ache in her chest. The room was private, pristine, but empty. A different nurse, a kind-faced woman, adjusted her for drip. "You're very lucky, Miss Shaw," she said softly. "Mr. Judges has spared no expense. He's been a nervous wreck staying by Ms. Mona's side day and night." The words were meant to be a comfort, but they landed like shards of glass. He chose her. The chose, overheard and now confirmed, echoed in the hollow space where her hope had once lived. It wasn't just a lie about an engagement. It was a verdict. In a moment of life and death, he had declared her disposable. When Sam finally appeared at her door days later, his face was etched with exhaustion, his expensive suit rumpled. "Tina, how are you feeling?" She didn't look at him. Her gaze was fixed on the city skyline outside the window, a world she now had to face alone. "You should be with Mona," she said, her voice flat and devoid of warmth. "She must need you." He started, his voice strained. "Tina, I was so worried." "Don't be." She cut him off, her tone sharp as a scalpel. "I'm fine, and from now on, I'll take care of myself. You don't have to worry about me ever again." The finality in her voice was a physical blow. Before he could process it, she was gone. She had checked herself out of the hospital against medical advice, leaving only a void in the room and in his life. Back at the mansion, he found her room stripped bare, her sketches, her books, her clothes all gone. A single, formal letter on her desk thanked him for his years of guardianship and informed him she had accepted a scholarship to Darwin University. A lie. He had personally checked every university she'd applied to. She had withdrawn all her applications weeks ago. A cold dread, slake and suffocating, seized him. He had pushed her away to protect her, and in doing so, he had pushed her into the abyss. His black Maybach sliced through the manicured campus of Darwin University, drawing stares from students lounging on the autumn lawns. He found her walking out of the design faculty, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her limp barely noticeable but a constant, painful reminder of his choice. He cornered her near a stone archway, his imposing figure blocking her path. "Why?" The word was torn from him, raw and uncharacteristic. "Why did you lie about the scholarship? Why did you just leave?" Tina flinched but held her ground, her eyes hard. "You want to talk about lies, Sam?" She took a step closer, her voice low and furious. "Let's talk about them. The spicy food you forced on me, knowing I was allergic, just to keep me away. The Ferris wheel you knew I was terrified of. Small betrayals, I told myself. But then you stood in a hospital corridor and chose her life over mine. You chose to let me become disabled so your fiancé would be okay." He flinched as if struck. "Tina, it wasn't like that. Wasn't it?" She challenged, her laugh bitter. She gestured to a small paper bag in his hand. "Let me guess, breakfast. Something bland and healthy you think I need?" She shook her head. "I've learned to eat spicy food now, Sam. I've learned to ride Ferris wheels. I've learned to live without you. I'm over all my bad habits including you." Her words cut deeper than any physical injury. She turned to leave, pausing to deliver the final blow. "I just want a normal life, with someone my own age. Someone who won't hurt me. Goodbye, Uncle Sam. Weeks later, the university's prestigious Starlight Jewelry Design Competition was her chance to prove she could stand on her own. Her piece, Phoenix, a testament to her rebirth from the ashes of her old life, was the favorite to win. She stood in the packed auditorium, heart pounding with nervous excitement as her name was called. Her presentation file was loaded onto the massive screen. The screen flickered, but instead of her intricate designs, a series of vulgar, digitally altered photos of her appeared, alongside plagiarized schematics from a famous designer. The hall erupted in gasps, then scornful murmurs. Fraud, someone yelled. Disgusting, cried another. The dean stormed the stage, his face thunderous, accusing her of academic indecency and catastrophic plagiarism. Her world dissolved into a nightmare of flashing cameras and pointing fingers. Through her tears, a classmate, Bella, rushed to her side, feigning sympathy. "Oh, Tina, this is awful. How could this happen?" But Tina's mind was racing, a single detail cutting through the panic. "Bella, she borrowed my USB stick this morning, said hers was corrupted." Suddenly, a voice, cold and authoritative, sliced through the chaos. "Shut it down." Every head turned. Sam Judges strode down the aisle, his presence commanding absolute silence. He ignored Tina's shocked face, his eyes fixed on the panicked dean. "I want the projector's server logs, the presentation file's metadata, and the forensic analysis of every device that accessed it. Now." He then turned his chilling gaze on Bella. "And I want your laptop." Bella paled. "I didn't do anything." Forensic analysis can recover deleted files and track every keystroke. "Miss," Sam said, his voice dangerously low, "perjury and corporate espionage carry severe penalties. Tell me who put you up to this, and I might persuade the university to settle for simple expulsion." Under the immense pressure of his gaze, Bella crumbled, sobbing. "It wasn't my idea. She paid me. Mona paid me to ruin her." As if summoned, Mona appeared at the back of the auditorium, flanked by security. She had likely called herself to witness her triumph, but her smug smile vanished when she saw two police officers approaching her. When they put her in handcuffs, her carefully constructed facade finally shattered. "You ungrateful orphan," she shrieked at Tina, her voice venomous and unhinged. "He was always mine. I should have made sure you died in that car crash." The raw, ugly truth of her malice hung in the air, her poisonous cloud. The entire auditorium was a witness, but the only person who mattered was Sam, standing frozen, his face a mask of horrified realization as he finally saw the monster he had brought into their lives. The sterile, white corridors of Seoul University Hospital felt like a tomb. Tina sat on a rigid plastic chair, the scent of antiseptic a sharp, unwelcome memory. Hours earlier, a frantic call had shattered her quiet world. Sam Judges Sr., the patriarch she knew as grandfather, had suffered a brain hemorrhage. Now, he was in surgery, and the family's iron composure was cracking under the strain. Sam, who had flown back from a business trip in Singapore, paced the far end of the waiting room, his tailored suit rumpled, his face a mask of stone that couldn't quite hide the tremor in his jaw. He hadn't looked at her once. A doctor in blue scrubs, his face lined with fatigue, approached the water cooler near Tina. He glanced at her, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. "You're Tina Shaw, aren't you? I was on duty when you were brought in a few months back. That accident." Tina nodded, her throat tight. "I remember." The doctor sighed, unscrewing the cap from a water bottle. "Your guardian, Mr. Judges. I've never seen anyone so torn. When they brought you both in, the paramedic said he had to make a choice. Mona was in the other car, and her injuries were more obvious. He chose her first." He paused, taking a slow sip of water as Tina's heart constricted into a familiar, Painful not. Of course, he had. But then, the doctor continued, his voice lowering. He lost it. Absolutely lost it. He grabbed my arm, his eyes wild, and screamed that he'd made a mistake, that nothing mattered if you weren't saved. He tried to run into your operating room. We had to physically restrain him. He kept yelling, "Save her first. I don't care about the cost. Just save her." The words hit Tina like a physical blow, knocking the air from her lungs. She stared at the doctor, then at Sam's rigid back. The entire narrative of his coldness, of his preference for Mona, fractured. Everything she had believed was a lie. Later, Sam's assistant handed her a key to his office. "Mr. Judges needs you to retrieve the preliminary merger analysis from his desk," the woman said, her tone polite but distant. "He doesn't want to leave the hospital." Inside the familiar, mahogany-paneled office, the scent of his cologne, sandalwood and bergamot hung in the air, a ghost of his presence. She found the files easily, but as she went to place them in a briefcase, her fingers brushed against a small, black moleskin notebook tucked into a side pocket. It wasn't a planner. It looked personal. A wave of guilt washed over her. But the doctor's words echoed in her mind, a dissonant chord demanding resolution. With trembling hands, she opened it. Sam's disciplined, slanted handwriting filled the pages. It was a diary, October 17. "She told me she loves me. The 3 words I've longed to hear and the 3 I can never accept. She is a child. My ward, I am her uncle. To admit what I feel would be to ruin her. I have to push her away for her own good." November 5th, Mona agreed to the plan. A fake engagement. It feels like swallowing glass. Seeing the hope die in Tina's eyes today was the hardest thing I have ever done. But this is the only way she will ever be free to find a young man her own age. To have a normal life. A life I can never give her. Tina's breath hitched. She flipped forward, her heart pounding a frantic, painful rhythm against her ribs. She found the entry from the night of the spicy seafood dinner. The night Mona had intentionally triggered her allergy. December 2nd, I did this. I watched her suffer. Her face flushed, her breathing strained, and I did nothing. I let Mona play her cruel game because it served my purpose. To drive a wedge between us. I went back to the restaurant after they left. I ordered the same dish, and I ate every last bite until my stomach burned and I was sick in the alleyway. A pathetic penance. I deserve so much worse for the pain I caused her. A sob tore from Tina's throat, hot and raw. The meticulous cruelty, the cold indifference, it was all a desperate, self-destructive act of love. The man who had punished himself for her pain was the same man who had pushed her away. The truth was so much more complex, so much more agonizing than simple rejection. That night, clutching the diary to her chest, she walked back to her dorm, and there he was, leaning against the old brick archway at the entrance, illuminated by the soft glow of a campus lamppost. He looked utterly depleted, his tie loosened, his shoulders slumped. He had been waiting. She walked straight toward him, stopping a few feet away. The cool night air swirled between them, thick with unspoken words. "Why?" Her voice was a broken whisper, but it carried the weight of months of heartache. She held up the black notebook. "Why would you do this to me? To yourself?" Sam's eyes fixed on the diary, and a shudder of relief and dread passed through him. The secret was out. "Tina, don't." She cut him off, taking a step closer, her eyes flashing with a pain that was now mingled with furious understanding. "You wrote that you were protecting me, that it was for my own good. How was there any of this good? The humiliation, the accident, watching you with her." He finally met her gaze, and the mask of the stoic CEO was gone, replaced by the raw vulnerability of a man stripped bare. "Because I love you," he confessed, the words torn from him, rough and aching. "And it terrified me, the age gap, the fact that I raised you." I'm your guardian, your uncle. It felt wrong, forbidden. I thought if I was cruel enough, you would eventually hate me, you would move on. You would be happy. Tears streamed freely down Tina's face. But they were no longer just tears of sorrow. They were tears of absolution. You were wrong, she said, her voice gaining strength. You were so wrong. She closed the distance between them, her small hands coming up to frame his face. You are not my uncle, she declared, her thumbs brushing away the moisture gathering in his eyes. You are the man I love, and you are going to be my husband. Before he could process her words, she pulled his head down and crushed her lips to his. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a desperate, claiming act, a fusion of pain and relief, of anger and forgiveness. Sam's arms, which had been frozen at his sides, finally came alive, wrapping around her waist and pulling her flush against him, lifting her slightly off the ground. He kissed her back with all the repressed longing, all the agonizing regret he had chronicled in his diary. When they finally broke apart, gasping for air under the hazy campus lights, their foreheads rested together. The barriers had been annihilated. No more plans, Tina whispered, her voice fierce and unwavering. No more secrets. Nothing is ever keeping us apart again.